Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson, Larry O'Connor. Coming up at 8:35, we'll be talking to Larry Kudlow. Have a conversation about where we are in these negotiations to avoid going over the fiscal cliff. At about 8:15, we're going to open up the phone lines. We've been talking a lot of this morning about what happened in Newton, Connecticut, and some possible approaches and things that need to be considered. We'll open up the phone lines to hear your thoughts at it at 1-888-630-9625. Larry?
Brian, joining us now, Andrew Klavan. He's a Hollywood screenwriter, author. In fact, his latest book, If We Survive, is available. It's part of his very thrilling Homelanders series. Joins us now, and I love it when we get the L.A. people out of bed early. Why should we be the only ones waking up early?
That's right. Why should we be alone?
Klavan, thanks for joining us this morning.
Larry, I will get you for this. I just want you to know that.
I have no doubt. You'll have to come to D.C. to find me. Listen, Andrew, we've had so many discussions, and of course the politicians and media types immediately jump to gun control as a solution. We as Americans, as human beings, we want solutions when something unexplainable, incomprehensible like this massacre in Connecticut happened on Friday. And many people are pointing to the culture, and that's kind of a large-ish word that really envelops Hollywood, films, video games, all these things that people are citing as examples of the coarsening of our culture and possibly contributing to violent tendencies in our youth. Now, you write books specifically targeting the youth as audience members, and they're thrilling. There's a lot of tension in there. May I say there's a little bit of violence in there, too. I think that you're a good person to speak on this.
Yeah, I have to be honest. You said quite rightly that it's very natural for people to look for solutions when something this terrible happens. But just take a notice for a minute about the fact that the people who are the quickest to propose solutions, whether it's gun control or attacking Hollywood or saying there should be more religion in school or whatever they're saying, they're never saying anything that would inconvenience them. They're never saying anything that really reflects on their lives. The people who attack gun violence are usually people like Mayor Bloomberg and President Obama who have armed guards and who probably aren't gun fanciers. The people who attack violence in Hollywood tend to be conservatives who don't like violent films. Religious people call for more religion. What this tells us, I think, is something about human nature, which is when the lights go out, when there's a moment of blackness like this and of grief and fear, we blame each other. We tend to panic and start pointing the fingers at the other guy, the guy who's not like us. And I think when we draw back a little bit we start to calm down again, we start to realize, first of all, violence has been on the decline in this country for decades. These mass shootings have been on the decline. There were fewer of them in the last 10 years than there were in the 10 years before that. This guy Lanza was not ignored by the authorities. They understood that he had problems, even though he didn't have the problems that typically lead to violence. So it was very hard to see. This is such a terrible tragedy in some part because there may not be anything we can do except grieve. When I lived in England, there was a horrible, horrible child killing of a little boy named Jamie Bolger, and the whole country went nuts over violent video games and over the movie Chucky, Child's Play 3 or something like this. As it turned out, there were no video games involved, no Hollywood movies involved, but the people could not stop talking about it. Even the judge in the case would talk about it because they couldn't let go of the idea that there was something that could be done.
Well, Andrew, you're right. We don't know whether there were video games involved in this particular case, but it certainly has that feel to it. I mean, it was almost like the guy was playing out one of those video games as he shot his way through the front door, and it was almost like one of those shoot-to-kill video games that he was playing out in his mind. And I wonder about that. I mean, as a parent, I know that there's a rating systems and all that, but literally these games are laying around because older brothers have them, and the latchkey kids come home and they start playing these games. Mom and dad aren't around to watch. I mean, it says a lot about parenting in our day and time, but is it not safe to say that perhaps we need to re-examine some of these really, really violent video games?
I don't know. I don't exactly know why. I mean, what you just said really does speak to parenting.
Because 9-year-old kids don't have the ability to separate.
9-year-old kids shouldn't be playing video games.
I understand that, but I mean, but they are.
But they are because their parents aren't paying attention.
Yeah, I understand that. But what real positive impact do those games have on society as a whole anyway?
Well, I guess that's a very complicated question. The only thing I would say about it is I'm not sure. I mean, video games are let's pile them on in the category of art, not meaning high art, but in the category of creative things that we do to entertain ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, I get all that. It is. I just, as a parent, that's one thing that I find a little troubling. I understand all the First Amendment issues, and I understand that you can't go around and pick and choose the things you like and don't like, and it's a form of free speech. Blah blah. I get all that. It still bothers me a little that these kids are having access to these games that are so incredibly.
Well, it bothers
violent.
me that there's lousy parents out there that are allowing the kids. That's what that bothers me more. In fact, it only bothers me because if you play it out, Brian, and take it to its logical conclusion, it means that the only solution is to keep adults who can be responsible with these games and these movies from enjoying them, and that's not the solution because then the government is the parent.
I completely understand and agree with you, but I just got to tell you that's the one thing I struggle with. Just as a parent, I really struggle.
I have to say that the fact that you don't like those video games and they concern you is a good thing. They should concern you as a parent. I mean, you shouldn't be allowing those things to fall into the hands of your children. That just shows you what the problem is. The parents who aren't concerned. The problem is not the video games; it's the parents who aren't concerned. And I think that's when we talk about those things, the really difficult things in our society, the way that parents, children who have no fathers, the violence, the real violence against children, which takes place in this country, which is almost all non-gun violence happening in the home. When we talk about those things, those are much more difficult to deal with. And so this kind of, it's almost like homeopathic magic. It's like pointing at something that looks like the tragedy and then wanting to ban that thing in the hopes that the actual tragedy will go away. Yeah. The one positive thing I can say, not the one positive thing, but a positive thing I can say about religion in this case is it gives us a much more honest language in which to talk about events like this. It gives us the language of evil, the language of brokenness, the language of helplessness, and those are things I'd much rather hear people talking about only because they're more real. They're more real than blaming something that looks like a tragedy but isn't a tragedy.
Well, listen, Andrew, great conversation, and really appreciate you joining us. And by the way, some really thoughtful stuff there for us to chew on, and appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
That is Andrew Klavan. His book is If We Survive. It's part of a Homelander series, and it is great for teenagers to read. It's sort of an entree into the whole genre of thrillers, and it's a really fun series. So, Andrew, congratulations on that, and thanks for joining us.